First landslide to hit Kerala. Wayanad death toll crosses 300. Flash floods in Himachal. Indian metros crumbling. Extreme weather events on the rise. Is India ready for climate emergency? Climate Roundtable.
Hello and welcome to this very special roundtable. Over 300 people have been dead. Many are still missing in one of the worst ever landslides to hit Kerala and the country. This is a monumental tragedy. Kerala itself has suffered many landslides and floods in recent years, but none as bad as this. But it's not just Kerala. Across the country, weather patterns are changing, causing untold damage to lives and property. Himachal Pradesh saw unprecedented floods last year. This week, over 50 people are missing after cloudbursts and floods. Our cities too are crumbling, unable to cope with weather events. They are getting flooded and waterlogged. Last week, in a basement in Delhi, 3 students drowned to death in a case of criminal negligence. The larger, therefore, question remains, is India really ready to face the climate challenge? It's a focus that needs to be spread as far as possible. Hello and welcome to this Climate Change Roundtable, where we will discuss the issue with a special panel of some of the country's best voices on the issue. Joining me now, Dr. Akshay Deoras is research scientist at the University of Reading in the United Kingdom. Dr. M.H. Swaminath is former Secretary Forest, Karnataka, and someone who's tracked this issue of the Western Ghats in particular for years. Sunita Narayan is the Director of the Centre for Science and Environment, has done sterling work over the years on the subject. S. Abhilash is Director, Cochin University of Science and Technology. And we're also joined at the moment by Sandeep Chachra, Development Activist and Executive Director, Action Aid Association. I appreciate each and every one of you joining us. I want to get initial remarks, but first let me throw the big questions today. Kerala landslide, is it a man-made tragedy? How does one improve landslide warning systems in this country? How does one protect the eco-sensitive Western Ghats? Is this part of a larger nature versus livelihood debate that we all need to wrestle with? Why are extreme weather events on the rise? How does one make India and our cities weatherproof? And are we heading for a climate emergency? These are the questions we will raise. I want to start with you, Sunita Narayan, to give us a sense of, are we heading towards that climate emergency? Let's take that last question first with you.
I think we are already in a climate change emergency, Rajdeep. Let's be very clear about this. Today, when we track extreme weather events, what does climate change mean? We are going to get more and more extreme weather events, increased frequency, increased intensity. And when you track this, as we do, we find that there is one extreme weather event a day, almost in India in 2023, and it's rising. The IMD has just put out data for the month of July, just for the month of July. And they are showing you that not only have heavy rainfall events increased, doubled, but also very heavy rainfall events have doubled. We are seeing almost a region getting half the year's rainfall in a matter of 24 hours. So this is climate change. But the point I want to make also, Rajdeep, is that this is not, whether it's Wayanad or Himachal or Delhi, this is not about climate change alone. It is about our willful mismanagement of the environment, of the callous disregard for every rule, regulation that should be operated in an ecologically fragile area, And this is really why you're seeing tragedy after tragedy. I'm saying this, Rajdeep, because there is a very easy cop out in this to say, what can we do? This is climate change. We must remember this is not climate change alone. Climate change is the tipping factor. It exacerbates the impact. And in a time of high risk of climate change, it means we must do much more to manage our environment, particularly the environment of ecologically fragile areas like the Himalayas, like the Western Ghats, much better than we have been doing today.
In a sense, what you're saying is that these are also partly man-made tragedies. Don't just pass the buck onto climate change. Good point, given what we've just seen in Wayanad. S. Abhilash, Director, Advanced Center for Atmospherics Radar Research at Cochin University. You're there in Kerala. Give us a sense. Do you believe that this is a man-made tragedy? That yes, there was this terrible rainfall, incessant and heavy for a very short duration of time. But could this have been averted had we recognized that these parts of the Western Ghats are ecologically sensitive and perhaps worked to keep people out of these very fragile zones?
Yeah, Rajdeep, actually this is a combination of the event because as Sunita Madam was telling, the extreme weather events are increasing day by day everywhere over Indian region. So that is a fact. But thing is that it is the calamity, the scale of the intensity or the nature of this calamity, if you look at it, is aggravated because of the man footprint from the human being, because most of the anthropogenic activities are making this more waste. Because if you look at the history of Western Ghats, Himalaya itself is not a dormant mountain like a Western Ghats. If you look at the history of Western Ghats, how it evolved with respect to the monsoon rainfall, because all our landscapes were evolved with respect to the rainfall, which is bringing a lot of water, which is intercepting with the mountain, and erosion has been happening. So that it is responding to that, and our midland is being built based on that erosion pattern over maybe 6500 millions of years. So this is what is happening even much before humans came into this land. So that is a fact. But thing is that due to global warming, this extreme weather events are increasing day by day, and that is causing a lot of this extreme event to happen over the Western Ghats. Because in our studies, what we found is that the southeastern Arabian Sea close to Kerala coast, it is becoming a hot spot for this mini cloudburst event, because cloudburst events are more common over the sub-Himalayan region. But over this region, it is becoming a kind of mini cloudburst prone area. Earlier, it was happening between Mangalapuram and the Goa coast. That is where the nature of the soil, the structure of the rocks, everything is different from the Kerala region. But the extreme rainfall were happening over that zone. And now that cloud band, the cloud cluster has been expanding towards northern Kerala region. That is bringing copious amount of rain in the northern Kerala region. So this is what is happening over Kerala, and our land is not.
So you're saying it's been happening and building up over this Kerala region. I'm just stopping you for a moment because I want to come to Dr. M.H. Swaminath, since you've been a former secretary for his government of Karnataka. And I want our viewers to remember Wayanad is at that tri-junction where Kerala, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, all these states really have a responsibility. But as you come, of course, across the Western Ghats, it's spread across coastal areas into Goa and eventually the Western Ghats into Maharashtra. We'll come to that, but I want Dr. Swaminath to respond to this charge that Dr. Madhav Gadgil, the noted ecologist, made, and I'm going to play his soundbite. I interviewed him 2 days ago, and he said this was a man-made disaster. And I want you to respond to that, Dr. Swaminath, but let's listen into what Dr. Madhav Gadgil said. His report was, many believe, the defining report for how do you protect the ecologically sensitive Western Ghats. Listen in.
The different political parties have distributed these illegal, mostly illegal rock quarries amongst themselves. this is owned by Kerala Congress, that is owned by a CPM politician, that is owned by a BJP politician, and so on. So it is their interest that these rock quarries make enormous profits. It is a complete mistake to think that these are to increase the ability of people to eke livelihoods. Not at all. The interventions have been, for example, that around the tea estate there are lots of tourist resorts where they are building lakes and so on, which are further increasing the burden on the geological structure. Nobody is really making any question about that these resorts, which are meant for the opulent and the rich section of the society, are creating much employment. Of course, they are doing nothing of the sort. The people who have died, which you will actually see, these are tea estate laborers. If I have been there, I have personally seen these, what happens. They are forced to live in miserable huts in ravines. All the good land is used for the enjoyment of the tea planters and their friends. They are forced, these people are forced to live in ravines and dealt with very poor wages and conditions essentially akin to slavery. And it is them who have got washed. This time also all the bodies are of these laborers in these huts close to the ravines. So,
Dr. Swaminath, you want to respond to what you just heard? Here is Dr. Madhav Gadgil virtually suggesting what happened in Wayanad is a man-made tragedy. You heard Sunita Narayan at the outset also suggesting humans cannot shirk responsibility for what is happening to nature. Your response, given the fact that only today we are told the centre has finally issued a draft notification to declare over 56,800 square kilometers of the Western Ghats across 6 states as ecologically sensitive.
Oh, that is a very good news, Zip. See, I partially agree with Dr. Gadgil, and when this report was prepared, I was also associated with this. He requested me to prepare a special chapter, on the infrastructure development exclusively in the Western Ghat area in the last 50 years, and I also prepared it. And I participated, I think, throughout, when we had interaction with the scientists, and also various stakeholders during preparation of Madhav Gadgil report. It's a well prepared report. And very comprehensively, we have delineated the area into ecologically sensitive areas of 1, 2, 3, and all. And we have said, ecologically 1 and 2 are highly sensitive, and we have said in ecologically sensitive areas, nothing can be done exclusive because they're highly sensitive, because mountain regions and all. And number 2, some activities which are already existing, like, maybe resorts, and, other, non-green activities, maybe, some of the small industries which are in orange category can be continued, and nothing further to be promoted there. And in the third category, it is a cultured area which has been cultivated for the thousands of years, and people are allowed to do their job with of course subject to the environmental conditions like orange category, red category industries and all that we did. There is no doubt on that. What Madhav Gadgil just now spoke is
but no one acted on it, sir. Sir, I'm sorry to stop. Sir, no one acted, whether it's the Karnataka government, Kerala government, Goa government, Maharashtra government, none of the governments acted on that report. Is it because there are vested interests or is it simply because it's difficult to achieve this balance between livelihoods and nature?
Exactly, I agree. I mean, there were a lot of concern expressed by the local stakeholders, particularly people in the zone 2 area. We said certain activities cannot be done at all. There are quite a few powerful lobbying sectors. I don't want to tell them. And those people certainly brought some pressure on the government to not to implement it. And but certainly it could have been partially it could have been implemented, particularly zone 1 could have been protected. And if it would not have happened, what happened in Wayanad, if it really completely protected, removed the people from those areas. And what Gadgil Saab is talking now, it is about, the how the impact of climate change, on the vulnerable section of the people, who are living in the huts and all. No, I completely agree with him. But what we really today discuss, is, what are the causes, for this? Why, these extreme events are happening, these EREs, are happening, particularly in the last, I think, 5 years, after 1990, I think nearly 137 EREs have happened in India. And India accounts for nearly 41% of our disasters are accounted for these floods, and nearly I think 16 to 17% to the landslides. Though we have a larger areas identified, not mapped, in the Himalayan region, 80% of the region vulnerable for these landslides. So 12% area in the Western Ghats. Still, they are highly sensitive. But this particular event that happened in Wayanad is a really extreme event where more than 200 millimeter rainfall occurs very rarely in India. It happens only in, I think, on average 3 days till from 1930 to 1980 or 1990 it was 3.5 days in a year. Extreme, exceeding 200 millimeter. Now it has increased to 5.7 days. I mean, it need not be due to climate change, but certainly there is a pattern emerging. So we have to wait for the data to be collated, and analyzed. But
So,
certainly,
I mean, the
events of,
question-
more than 200 millimeter has increased. Particularly the urban cities like Mumbai. Mumbai used to witness only 2 days, 3 days in a year of exceeding 200 millimeter. But in the recent time, it has happened in 5 days, 4 days, 4 times. That means, and also months have changed. It used to happen in July, now it happens up to September also. So we know, which are the dates, which are the weeks now which are highly vulnerable for 200 more millimeter rainfall. See, up to 120 we can manage. 200 millimeter, it is beyond anyone's control to do anything. The response time will be very less.
No, you're saying it's beyond. No, but sir, I take your point that you're saying that these are extreme events. It becomes increasingly tough to manage. But the fact is, and I want to bring in at this moment Akshay Deoras, research scientist, National Center for Atmospheric Sciences at Reading. Is India just not prepared for it? We've set up the debate with Sunita Narayan saying, just don't blame climate change. Look at what we've done to our environment over the last decade and more. Is it something preventable in some way, Akshay? Is there a sense that we don't have the systems in place to handle these extreme events as they get more and more frequent?
We are not prepared for sure. And this is one classic example that justifies what I'm saying. And if you just look at the overall situation that is happening in India, see, let's be very clear. The science is very clear that extreme rainfall events and even extreme weather events are going up. And it's all because of anthropogenic climate change, right? And the global warming continues to accelerate. See, what happens is that we cannot stop rainfall. We can, of course, we'll be able to sort of reduce the number of extreme events, but that all depends on how drastically we cut down our greenhouse gases, the emission of that, and that is going to take time. But we can't just wait for that to happen because, like I said, it takes time. So the other thing is that if you have a situation where people are living and, wherever it's 500 millimeters rainfall happening in 2 days, they are unfortunately bound to get killed because today it's 500, tomorrow it could be 700, today we have 300 deaths, tomorrow it could be 500 deaths. So it all depends on the forecasting system and the alerting system that needs to be robust. And I'm very sad to say that the system is not that robust as of now.
Can I also bring in Sandeep Chachra at this moment? Sandeep, can you hear me?
Absolutely. Thank you, Rajdeep.
Yeah, Sandeep, you may have caught a bit of what Akshay said, and Akshay seemingly suggesting that, you need to wake up and recognize the kind of challenge that you're now facing. Do you believe that there is that recognition, there is an understanding within policymakers as to the extent of challenges that face us if we don't respond to climate change effectively with policy interventions? Is that there? Is there realization there that we are already in a climate emergency?
There is a social recognition. I work on the ground and I see communities who are impacted, Rajdeep, whether it's workers, whether it's agricultural workers, whether it's fisher folk, whether it's nomadic pastoralists, whether it's the entire working classes of India. So there is a huge social recognition that things are not what they used to be, and not just the debate that you were framing in nature versus livelihood. The tipping point has become lives versus livelihoods. So it's almost the question of lives versus livelihoods. So there's a social recognition, but sadly, policy system, policy making, establishment lags behind it. And lags behind it substantially. So I think that goes to the debate on democratic policy making and inclusive and participatory policy making. Quite a separate chapter, but you had Dr. Madhav Gadgil, and Gadgil report, if you remember, in 2011 was dismissed as being too environmentally friendly and not in tune with ground realities. And I think sadly we have come to a time where this debate is really live. It's extreme weather events were talked of, the intensity and frequency by Sunita ji, but it's clearly a man-made situation. We know what is happening. Are we prepared for it? Have we prepared for it? We know, for instance, this is not a sudden pattern. We know that in any case, we always knew that much of India's rainfall happens in a 3-month period. And we know that this has shifted, and we know those patterns. We know the intensity has shifted. So what has been our preparedness to it, whether it's towns or whether it's the countryside? So the fate of both towns and what is called the urban areas and the rural areas intertwined in this kind of a situation. So I think we need to recognize that, and to sort of let off the hook, design, planning, preparedness systems, adaptation systems, climate mitigation systems. We are quite away from bringing that into policy making. Let me bring a small fact here. Dr. Gadgil spoke about, in the brief video, he spoke about the differential impact of climate change and these changing patterns on different segments of society. He was talking of, in this case, almost the bonded conditions of tea estate and tea plantation workers. So we know there is differential impact. We know that they are pushed into untenable situations, untenable living situations, untenable habitats, fragile habitats, whether it's the plantation sites of Kerala that we're talking of, or the Western Ghats, or whether it's the cities where they are pushed into absolutely untenable, sort of water bodies or next to the rivers. We've seen that all across, or in landslide prone areas in the mountain cities of India in those areas. So we know that the impact is going to be differential, much high on their lives, on their habitats, on their livelihoods, on their incomes, but also on their expenditures. And the pathway to come out of such torture is extremely tenuous for them. And what are we doing? What is the sort of policy recognition on that? For long, activists working on the ground have been asking for loss and damage compensation mechanism for livelihoods, but as well as for habitats. And we see, what do we see instead? A whole range, a growing populace of what is called climate migrants. So, but the policy hasn't responded. The policy making establishment hasn't responded. So, yes, there's a global debate. Yeah, go ahead, please.
So you're saying policymakers are a step behind in a way, but on the ground, is there a recognition is the question. I just want to turn for a moment to the State of India's Environment CSE report, since we have Sunita Narayan with us. India experienced extreme events on 318 out of 365 days in 2023 across different states and union territories which were impacted. Heavy rains, floods, landslides occurred on 208 days. Lightning and storms were recorded on 202 days. And in 2023, we witnessed 49 heat waves, 29 cold waves, 9 cloudbursts, 123 consecutive days with extreme weather events between June and September in 2023. 3,287 human lives lost, 124,813 animals killed, 2.21 million hectares of crop damaged. 2023 was the warmest year in India's recorded history, a 1.48 degree rise in temperature compared to pre-industrial levels, highest number of days exceeding global mean temperatures of 1.5 degrees Celsius. Now, Sunita Narayan, when I throw those numbers from your report, people will they be shocked, you hope, into action? Will they act as just now was suggesting on the ground? Are village societies recognizing, whether they are fisher folk, people living in the Western Ghats or by the Himalayas, are they recognizing it? or are they collaborating in the destruction of these eco-sensitive zones?
So Rajdeep, your panel has raised a lot of very important issues. Firstly, on the data that you have put out from our report, let me make it very clear that this is data from the Indian Meteorological Department. So it is all we have done is to collate official data. And we have put together a countrywide picture. This is all official data. In terms of the lives lost, the data is from the Ministry of Home Affairs. So we must understand, and if this does not shock us or worry us, I'm not sure what will. So I think clearly the effort is to at least put a factual picture together and a countrywide picture together, which helps us to understand the scale of the devastation today and the scale of what is to come tomorrow. I think what you have also heard today from your panelists is two important issues. Madhav has raised a very important issue of the fact that we are creating a situation where the poorest today are victims of these disasters, but they are also victims of the way we are doing development and conservation. Madhav's example is about the fact that in these ecological areas, you are now seeing more and more resort type places coming up, which are important for ecotourism, important for tourism, important for livelihood. But at the end of the day, it is the poor in these areas who are not benefiting. So when you're talking about livelihood versus development, we also have to unpack this to understand that the poor are not part of this development story, whether it comes to conservation or whether it comes to development. And this is where the panelists who spoke before me so eloquently put out the fact that the poor in this country understand. When you go and talk to a farmer, I'm often asked this, but Indians don't know about climate change. And I'm saying, go ask a farmer in India. They will tell you, they know it's happening. They see the seasons change. People who live with nature understand that something really unfortunate is happening. And this is what I really want to say more strongly and with as much force, Rajdeep, policy is not catching up. And you raised the point and you said that today is good news because the government of India has issued a draft notification. Let me make it very clear to you, Rajdeep, and through you to all your viewers, this is not on. In 2014, the first draft notification was issued. In 2015, the second draft notification was issued. In 2018, the third draft notification was issued. In 2019, the fourth, and 2020, the fifth. Now you're getting the sixth, and they're still draft notification. They're draft. They're not notifications.
So why? No. So why? Why do you think that they're unwilling to bite the bullet? Why?
Because see, what does the draft notification say? This is on the basis of Gadgil and then the Kasturi Rangan report. They essentially say that about 60,000 square kilometers of the Western Ghats has to be defined as ecologically sensitive. When you define an area as ecologically sensitive, you then ratchet up the protection for those areas. By ratcheting up the protection, the things that are not going to be allowed, which is in the draft notification. I'm hoping it still made it to the last one as well. It was there in the previous ones, was that you would not have any polluting industry. You would not have any mining, including the quarrying that Madhav has just spoken about. You would also close down all the existing mines within 5 years of the notification coming into effect. You would not build any thermal power projects. No settlements over 20,000 square meters would be allowed, no buildings. Settlements would be allowed in individual houses, but no buildings of over 20,000 square meters would be allowed. And most importantly, hydroelectric projects would go through a double level of scrutiny to make sure that they were ecologically compatible with the area. So what you're doing is to declare an area and you're saying to it that certain restrictions will come in because protection has to be increased. Now, this is where what we mean by development and what that development means is playing against the playing to the fears of people. For the last 15 years, this notification has been on a football match because there is huge protest against from not just, and I don't think it's local people. It is not the farmers. It is not the plantation owners. It is more people who want to make money out of the Western Ghats, whether it is mining, whether it is projects that we have just talked about. So there is a conflict.
Right.
But this is where, Rajdeep, we need to redefine development in an ecologically sensitive area.
We'll come to that. Let's turn to, therefore, solutions. In my second part here, I want to turn to solution. Dr. Swaminath, you heard Sunita Narayan make this impassioned statement both about the state of our environment as well as how policy makers simply are not walking the talk. You've been in government. Why does it not happen? Give me a clear answer, and do you see a solution? Let's be clear. Governments do not seem to, from the outside, seem to be prioritizing environment. We've seen deforestation take place in some of the most sensitive parts of this country with little pushback from the government. In fact, the government is a collaborator, both at the center and states. Is there a solution? You were in government. Are governments reluctant in a way to really walk the talk on these contentious environment issues? If there's a hydroelectric plant to be set up in a sensitive area, a power plant, governments do not want to push back. They give these permissions.
Yeah, I agree with Sunita Narayan ji that there is a vested interest particularly these areas, particularly mining lobbies could be the.
So what's the solution? So what's the solution, sir? Sorry to. What's the solution?
The solution, I think the government has to be very bold, and they have to, weigh the option, they have to choose between the people's safety and also, ecological security of the people is more important to the state, because if you want waters to flow normally, because millions of people down the stream, they live on the, the river that flows. So unless, you protect, the ecosystem comprehensively, then you are going to have these disasters continuously.
No, but will they do it, sir? Sir, will they do it? For example, sir, look at what is happening with my lovely state of Goa. The manner in which Goa's lands are being ravaged, if I may use the word, by construction taking place in some of the most sensitive areas, both by the coastline and in the hills. Now, all this is being done, and many believe, in violation of existing rules. So the bureaucrats, the politicians, they don't seem to be pushing back. What do citizens do? What do the citizens of Goa then do?
I see. I completely agree with you that the government has to be very serious if they want to really protect the environment. I mean the Mother Garden report, and also we gave alternatively a Surengan report also. In that report also I was involved. And what we did was we had only two zones. One is cultured area where no-go area is one, and also go area where with environment conditions applicable, they have to regulate the new industries or new activities. So this we did it. So one of these reports should have been adopted, but Kerala was quite, I think, affected, because nearly 70 to 80% of the villages were affected. In Karnataka, it was not very many. It was, I think, around 134 villages were completely affected, and those villagers were really apprehensive that that we may not be allowed to even cultivate our normal crops. That was the apprehension. That was maybe a communication gap. So the people agitated, and government yielded for this kind of the pressure from the, I mean, of course, in the name of farmers, villagers.
Sir,
also they took. Yeah. Please.
Sir, I take your point. My question again is coming down to the solution, because we are all identifying the problem. The problem exists. I'm sure people in government far more educated than I certainly would be in the studio, know the problem. Everyone knows, those who live on the ground, MLAs, councillors, all of them know the problem, but they have vote banks out there. I want to bring at this moment Dr. Anjal Prakash. She's Research Director at the Bharati Institute of Public Policy and author of the IPCC Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Dr. Prakash, give us the solutions. We have identified the problem. The recognition is out there, particularly even among locals, that this is a serious climate emergency. What is the solution? Why is it that, what will it take to shake the governments into action at state and center?
Yeah. So, this, as you know, Wayanad case has been there for a long time. There is in 2011, the Madhav Gadgil report has come, which was accepted in 2014. This has been 10 years since then, and things have not moved. And then the strategy that you've seen is appalling for all of us, and this means that we have to work across party line. And this is not only about Wayanad, but it's a entire ecological fragility of the Western Ghat which is at stake. So we have to move forward, and we have to form a committee which is all party committee, where everyone has to contribute to this whole process. That consensus has to reach. First, there has to be a political consensus, and second is that you have to take other stakeholders into account, which is unfortunately not happening. That's number one. Number two is also about the, in the political hierarchy that we are seeing, that blame game started every time a climate catastrophe like this strikes. We only see a blame game. We don't see an action towards that. The third point is about the, institutional framework. We also have to see that every time it's not only about Wayanad. But today when we are talking, we also see that the problems are happening in Himachal Pradesh, in the Himalayan states. The kind of a rainfall that is unprecedented. Every year that you see that these incidents are taking over and breaking all the records of the last year. Now, I am saying that we must go for a separate ministry for climate change, because climate change is becoming a very, very, what I would say, prominent phenomena. Every season there's something that we are talking about, but we are not doing much about it. And that's where the problem lies, that we are institutionally also, we are not coming into one line and trying to see.
So you're calling for
Yeah.
You're calling for some kind of a nodal ministry that looks at climate change, that then works with other ministries in a way. Akshay Devras, give us global examples. How have other countries across the world dealt with it? Can you give us of a successful example which could be replicated in India?
Give you one example of tornadoes in the US, and we can't really have an apple-to-apple comparison, but that's a very interesting comparison. So they do get a lot of tornadoes in central parts of the US. That's what they call as the tornado alley. And tornadoes, again, are quite local. So just think about all these rainfall events. They have been very localized. So we do have problems when it comes to forecasting localized events, because weather prediction models do a very good job when it comes to predicting bigger things, like, for example, tropical cyclones. But over smaller scales, there are limitations. So tornadoes are very local, and there are also a lot of people who live there. But in the US, they have got a very robust surveillance and warning system, in which what happens is that they have got a very dense network of Doppler radars. They would keep on surveilling things, and whenever they see a tornado forming, they would just send out alerts straight away on the phone of people. So you just get an alert straight away on your phone. Look at what is happening in India. So it's not just Wayanad. Just zoom out a bit. Look at Delhi. So 28th of June, 31st of July, two events when you just get extreme rainfall in less amount of time. We don't have specific warnings for the day. Next day, holiday is declared, there is red alert, but nothing happens. So all this thing needs to stop. And this is going to stop only when we get into a situation where we improve the surveillance of these clouds. We keep people away from all this ecologically sensitive zone. And we just tell them straight away that, okay, the storm is heading in your direction. Just prepare, prepare, prepare. That's it.
You're saying, therefore, it is possible to have these early warning systems and communicate them effectively to people. Sandeep Chachra, you have a solution. Where would you start? If you were asked, give me a solution to this climate change emergency, where would you start, Mr. Chachra?
I would start with framing the entire climate emergency, climate debate, or what we have, this discussion, in a justice framework. So it is, in reality, as Sunita ji was also referring to, the question of climate justice, of differential responsibilities and differential sort of suffering. So I think it's very important, and in order to also create social pressure, it's very important to frame the debate in a historically and contemporary correct manner, a class debate, a debate of what is called climate justice. So I think first thing first, I think the role of the state and therefore the role of public investment, whether it's in building urban commons, rural commons, policy on commons, is fundamental. The role of the welfare state in public investments in cities, in the countryside, to build onto adaptation so that people can adapt, and to build into solutions, the resilient solutions, or the what is called the climate resilient solutions, whether it's to do with agriculture, whether it's to do with how our cities today are, essentially grey infrastructures and hellholes in many ways, as you can see. So the role of public investment, and therefore of the state oversight and the state responsibility, and therefore of the ownership of the state responsibility in compensating people who are suffering on account of no fault of theirs. And these are popular classes of India, and the numbers are huge. So compensating, protecting, ensuring future livelihoods, ensuring their habitats or relocated habitats that Rajdeep, you referred to, in some cases from very ecologically fragile areas. And then thirdly, and quickly, the check and regulation on private reality developers in cities or random private development with totally commercial interests, totally ramping over people, the planet itself. So I think that needs to be regulated. The strong arm of the state needs to focus there. And I think that's been a weak spot across. You see it in cities, you see it in, you're talking of Western Ghats, Dr. Gadgil was speaking to it, Sunita ji was speaking to it, exactly that. Tourism, highways, unchecked kind of roads for promoting tourists at the cost of people who live there, the tribals who live there. So I think these are some of the pathways we need to build together. And I want to conclude on this particular point by saying that this unleashes a public pressure. Therefore, the need to have a public discourse and this debates like this, but many more. But I think a public pressure and a building of public discourse, which is fomenting on the ground, is fundamental to resolve issues in a democratic, accountable manner in the framework of rights and justice. So that's how I would like to sort of approach the solutions. Yeah. Thank you.
The fact is, but these solutions, the so-called democratic solutions, Sunita Narayan, we've seen with the church in Kerala. The church also did not support the Gadgil report. Civil society group, we saw in Joshimath, when people were being moved last year from areas which had developed cracks, there was a reluctance on the part of people to move out of areas where they've lived for years, for decades. In Himachal Pradesh, people, can you really move them out of some of these eco-sensitive zones? Instead, what you've got is construction taking place in areas which were earlier very pristine. So when you say that locals have understood the challenge of climate emergency and are ahead of policymakers, is that really the case? Is civil society really recognizing the challenge, or is this not a top priority in a country where millions live ultimately in very basic conditions on the margins? Can they be expected to suddenly up and leave these eco-fragile areas or change their lifestyle in some way?
Rajiv, that's a very good question, but I think you're also pushing all of us into solutions. So let me make it very clear. There is a solution here. The fact is, it's not about moving people. And I think that is the worst solution that we could ever offer. When it came to Joshimath, let me make it very clear. You know, and I know, the Joshimath tragedy is about the mindless way in which we are making hydroelectric projects in the fragile, extremely fragile, high Himalayan zone. It had nothing to do with the local people that their town is sinking, and now you're asking them to move. The development that was wrong was the back-to-back. I'm in favor of hydroelectric projects. My problem is the way they were conceptualized to be back-to-back. And it's the same when it comes to Western Ghats. I don't think you should please frame this to say that ecologically sensitive region means people must leave. What you have to frame it to say is, what is the kind of development that is good for people and good for the ecology? And that's the question that we have never really explored. And we need to explore, because the only thing that we know is to make a large shopping mall wherever we go. And if the shopping mall has a lot of glass, that is what we see as a sign of modernity. Now, the fact is, in these ecologically fragile areas, you will need to have livelihood options for the very poor people, for anyone. You cannot talk about locking up people, places. Now, even if you talk about locking up places, which also may be needed, given the ecological fragility, you will have to talk about compensating people who live there. The 14th Finance Commission report, or the 15th, I can't remember, had a very interesting, or 13th it was, had a very interesting concept of compensating states for the forest that they would not cut. So normally you say, don't cut a forest, but they don't get paid for it. Unfortunately, Rajdeep, and I think this is where our collective ability to argue has never been there, has been that Finance Commission report was whittled away in later finance commissions, and it's now nothing but a fund that goes to the general state, and I'm told in the last Finance Commission it was removed. But this is the concept of ecological payment. You say, this is a region very fragile. You cannot have development here, but you still have to live. So let's have a payment to you for the protection of this ecological area, which you, me, and everyone has to pay for. So there are ways out, Rajdeep. And I think the point that Akshay made is also very important, that for in an age of climate change, just as we need to find a development model which is compatible with nature, compatible with people, we will also have to find a way in which we greatly improve our monitoring systems and advisories on weather. And I think that point of Akshay's is very important to note, because yes, we have them, but not enough. The only success story India has, and something that we can be very proud of, is the way we manage cyclones. And we have an excellent forecasting system of cyclones and a way to inform people about cyclone so that evacuation happens. Landslides are very difficult to predict.
That's exactly it, because there has been this talk of early warning systems that were given, but locals say there was no red alert the day before, and therefore the people in and around the villages in Wayanad were not evacuated in time, and there's been this huge blame game between the centre and state. But you're right, cyclones have shown what's possible with early warning system. Akshay, you mentioned tornadoes in the west. So in a way, it's going to have to be communities, the local stakeholders, governments, environmentalists all working together. We cannot remain in silos, presumably, Akshay, anymore. We're going to all have to work together on this. Am I correct? Including the media. I mean, how many debates do we have on climate change? Very few. It takes a Wayanad for even channels to wake up, at least some of us, to wake up to what lies ahead.
Absolutely, Rajdeep. And on that note, I would like to congratulate and thank you and your team for taking this issue and following it up quite seriously. Everyone has to work together because, we just need to understand that we don't have that much time. We are already seeing the impacts of climate change and global warming. These things are intensifying and we just don't have time. And remember, to improve a weather forecasting system or a warning system, it is going to take more time. So we can't really sit back and relax and say, okay, this is just Wayanad. Like I said, today it's Wayanad. Tomorrow it could be some other place in India. And this thing has to stop. So we can't control the nature, but we have to improve our warning system. And that needs to be done on several fronts because, let me just take you one simple example of the warning fiasco that has happened. So right now we have got different color coded warning systems, like it's yellow, green, and then you have orange and then red. But there's a lot of confusion about this. Like, states say that we would just respond only when there is a red alert. But the center says that, red alert is a second step. You need to start acting whenever there is an orange alert. So this is not going to work like that. You need to have something which is very easy to understand. And that's something that people can, okay, this is what is going to happen. Let's just act. That's the only way forward. And everyone has to work together.
I think, in a way, what we are all in this together. This is a challenge which civil society faces as much as the state faces. And climate justice and issues of climate equality, these are all issues which are going to be dominating the discourse across the world in the next few decades. And India cannot be a step behind, certainly not a step behind. I want to give Dr. Prakash, because he joined us late, a quick final word. Dr. Prakash, do you believe that things will get better with time? That the more we have these wake-up calls, tragic as they may, it'll force society and the state to come together and recognize the climate emergency we face?
No, absolutely. I think unfortunately, that's the way it is happening. Is that when any big event like this happens, and then we get together, and then soon after that we forget about the whole issue. So that is, I think that the political acumen has to rise, and the political consensus has to come through. Otherwise, this is something which we will not be able to manage. That's number one. Number two is also about the civil society and the rise of the making right noises, and also bringing forward a solution that is going to be helpful for us. For example, IPCC reports have already been pointing out a broad way in which these events are going to strike, and what are the solutions that we have, but we have never implemented any of the solutions that has been prescribed. And that's where I think and I feel that, again, to reiterate, that the institutional framework in which we are working has to change. There has to be a coordinating ministry which coordinates with all departments, and that's where the buck should lie. And otherwise, you fix responsibility for the state, for the center. That is where it has to work. Otherwise, it will be very difficult for us to manage it.
Let's leave it there. As I said, it's taken a monumental tragedy of unimaginable proportions, and our thoughts and prayers today, as we've debated this issue, are at the end of the day with the people of Wayanad. It's a beautiful part of the country. I've had the privilege of going there, and it is one of those pristine parts of the country that really celebrates the great diversity, the eco-diversity of the Western Ghats. We need to preserve that, treasure that for generations to come. And the only way to do that will be to accept that we are in a climate emergency, and our responses, therefore, will have to be of an emergency nature. I want to thank all my guests for joining us and for sharing us their thoughts and some of the solutions. You too can join this debate on indiatoday.com. From the entire team, thanks for watching. Goodbye. Jai Hind. Namaskar.